Hi, friend. Welcome to Her Evergreen Soul. My name is Amy Brady, and I help women to uncomplicate their spiritual life through a heart and body approach to spiritual growth. Walking with you on the path to spiritual formation is a passion of mine. I've been serving women for over 20 years as an author, speaker, yoga instructor, and now as a spiritual director. Let me ask you a question. Do you feel like your spiritual life is in a rut? Do you feel like your efforts to grow are never enough? Does it all just seem complicated? Then come sit with me a spell and let me share with you the unforced rhythms of grace. I want to invite you down the contemplative path into spiritual practices that ground your heart and free your soul, where you can live an integrated, embodied faith and learn how to keep your soul evergreen no matter what season of life you're in. Today on the podcast, I am delighted to introduce you to a very special friend of mine. Her name is Emma Timms, and we're going to be talking about Emma's brand new book, Faith Habits and How to Form Them. Emma is a retreat guide, wellness coach, movement teacher, and spiritual director. She lives on the east coast of Scotland with her husband and 4 children. Emma comes alive in wide open spaces and loves to swim and hike in nature. And she is an absolute delight to be around. And she has so much deep wisdom to share on this subject, which is probably one of my favorite things to talk about, spiritual formation. So I hope you enjoy the chat. All right, thank you so much for joining me today. I am really excited for this podcast interview. It's a very special one with a very special friend. I have Emma Timms all the way from Scotland today. She is a dear friend. We both co-led a pilgrimage to the Isle of Iona this year, and she has just released her first book this year, and it just released in the States in September, called Faith Habits and How to Form Them, 21 Seasonal Practices to Strengthen Your Spiritual Life. So welcome, Emma.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're currently doing with the Prayer Orchard.
Yeah, so I'm a retreat leader and a spiritual director and a movement teacher. And so what I love to do is integrate spiritual practice and movement. So that gets to come together in my online community, which is the Prayer Orchard. So we gather together 3 times a week to move, to pray, to do different spiritual practices like the Examen and breath prayer, and kind of journey along together in that way. So that's one of the things I get to do that I really love.
Oh, that's wonderful. So even though you're in Scotland, if someone in the States wanted to join the Prayer Orchard, obviously there would be a time difference, but it would still be possible. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, everything's
Okay.
recorded. Yeah.
Okay.
A journaling practice each week as well, like a kind of reflect on your week, which we do together, and we get to have a little bit of a chat, and that's really nice too. So
Okay.
yeah,
And if they really want to go all out, which I hope to one day be able to do, they can just pop across the pond for one of your retreats.
absolutely. Yeah.
Wouldn't that be amazing? Maybe we
Well,
should work
get
on
me
that
over
next
there.
time. Or yes, have you over here. Absolutely. Okay, so you and I met through the Yoga Abbey. And this is the most British story of my life. I met Emma the first time in a pub in Glasgow, which we don't get to say a lot of that kind of stuff here. And so I love the whole pub scene as far as like how it's such deep community in a
Yeah.
lot of places. Like it is just like the natural thing where everyone kind of gathers. Usually in America, if everyone's gathering at the bar, that's kind of like not maybe the best thing, but there's so much more community involved in it. It's almost like the local restaurant and the local pub in one. But we met in Glasgow with a mutual friend. You had started doing your yoga teacher training with the Abbey, I believe. And I was there with Caroline Williams, who's the founder of the Yoga Abbey. We were headed to the Isle of Iona for both of our first time. And you popped over to Glasgow because what other chance would you ever have to meet Caroline in person,
Yeah, just came over to
right?
say
Yeah.
have some food together. Yeah.
It was so great because I remember telling her in the hotel room, like, look, she does not know me from Adam's house cat. So if you just want to go meet her, I don't want her to be disappointed that someone else is there, and she may not have as much time with you. And she's like, oh, no, no, no. It's not like that at all. Come with me. And I'm so, so glad I did. So, so glad I did. I just really enjoyed meeting you and sensed something really unique and special about you. So, when I started making plans to go to the Isle of Iona, I reached out to you and we started a conversation and thankfully a friendship. And so, we've done that together. We've gone through the spiritual exercises together, a lot of different things. So, I know a little bit about your background and your how you came to be involved in spiritual practices as a way of life, but would you share with everyone else about that journey?
Yeah, I think it began for me when I went from having one child to having two. And so I had a baby and a toddler, and all the ways I knew to connect with God weren't really sort of working anymore. I would go to church
Mhm.
and sit in the creche. I would try and pray with friends, and we'd run around after our kids, or I'd try to read the Bible and I'd fall asleep. And I didn't know where to go or what to do. And eventually, spiritual practices kind of found me as I began to explore. And that's kind of what I was looking for all along, a way to integrate God into the life that I had and connect with God just as I was in that season and every season since. So that's kind of how I got started. So that's been a while because I now have 4 children. Uh,
Wow.
yeah. And the eldest is just left for uni. So it's been quite
Oh,
a
wow.
journey. Yeah.
Yeah. And isn't it interesting how the journey of bringing spiritual practices into your life is kind of a long one. I
Yeah.
mean, I feel like that it was for me too. I look back and I'm like, oh, wow. I mean, I feel like I've had this as a part of my life forever, and I haven't. It's only been 7 years, but then at the same time, I feel like I've only just hit the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's just interesting how it's just like one thing kind of adds to the other. Do you remember the first spiritual practice that you kind of like said, I think I'm going to try it this way as far as connecting with God? Do you remember which one it was?
I think it was probably Sabbath. Like I'd heard of
Mm.
Sabbath, but I didn't really. I just kind of thought, oh, a day off, and very like cloaked in sort of religion, where you kind of have to do this, can't do that. I had that
Mhm.
sort of, and I didn't really know anybody that practiced the Sabbath. But yeah, we've been doing that for kind of over 10 years now as a family, and just having this day to rest and delight and to lay down our kind of tools and
Mm.
adventure and do all different things depending on the season we've been in. But that was probably the first one,
Mhm.
first way of almost living that I noticed was different, especially, to be honest, especially around people in ministry. I noticed that they were often quite burnt out and didn't really rest. And
Yeah.
we kind of knew when we did eventually plant a church, we knew we were going to take those practices with us, and we didn't. We kind of learned from what we saw around us and thought, oh, like we want to have time for our family and have rest and
Mm.
still like each other and have fun.
Yeah,
uh, yeah,
exactly.
yeah. So that was probably the first.
I think the part of your story about how you got into spiritual practices, I kind of lost a little bit of that, and that it was motherhood that kind of said, okay, things are not the way they used to be, and I can't do these things that I used to do to mature in my faith or just maintain my faith anymore in the same way, because I have so many young women that I talk to, and this is a big part of it when they're believers and they become a mom, the guilt and the shame that sets in that they cannot have enough time for God, don't have the same amount of time they used to have. They're too tired to even want to have the time. It's really so sad. And I went through the same thing. But it breaks my heart that, for a woman that she feels like that we're so entrenched in, like you said, this religious way. Oh, okay, this is what we do and this is how we do it, that it can't bend and fold with the changes and transitions of our lives and even seasons of our
Yeah.
lives, right? Where we just don't have the capacity or the time. How do you think it helped you actually in your relationship with God to step into that grace of there are other ways to be with me?
I think it just opened my eyes to kind of wonder and possibility. And also I was making God very small before. And
Mhm.
and I was also, I suppose, having these sections of time, but I think the invitation was God is always present and always wanting to be with us and is dwelling within us, and that we can have that connection all the time. And I think it moved it more and more into relationship. And that was the real grace, because I just had to show up as I was and allow God into all the parts of my heart. And it was a bit like being an explorer, kind of going
Mhm.
along and just seeing how much I could notice and remember God and all these little tiny ways, because that was what was available to me. But in the end, it was a gift, because the more you do something little and often, the more it does become part of your life, and the more you your attention and heart goes towards God, you remember, because you've
Mhm.
practiced in those kind of hard times. So yeah, it was a real race to me. And I think there is the guilt and the shame element that can be there, but also just the kind of missing God, just like, oh,
Mhm. Yes.
I don't know how to hear from God anymore, and I feel sad, like almost like a loss of relationship. And I don't know what to do, and I don't know. Nobody seems to be able to tell me, apart from, oh, this is just sort of how it is now. And I always knew, no, I don't think it is. Um, just like
Mhm.
if you were very ill, or you were caring for someone, or whatever season you're in. I think God is just waiting to meet us.
Yeah, I love that because I feel like having those moments in our life where we don't have the capacity or the time, and it affects our relationship with God as far as the ways we interact with
Mm.
God, is really such an opportunity to mature our faith. We think it's stunting our faith, it's taking our faith away. And yet, if we will lean into it
Yeah.
and trust and believe that there is grace for that, that God is understanding, that He doesn't nearly, hardly ever expect as much from us as we expect from ourselves or one another,
Mhm.
that there's such an opportunity to know Him in a different way. Um, and for your view of Him, like you said, it was small, but to expand and in doing so, mature.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I love that it's maybe coining it more as, that motherhood really is and can be a big part of our spiritual formation, in so many ways. And seeing that as the gift that it is, like, oh, God's taking me to another place with Him. Kind of like when we're children and you take away those toys that are special, you may have a room full of other ones, but all you can focus on are the ones that are gone, or maybe you got disciplined and your parent took that from you. That's all you can focus on. And it's just a shift in focus of what else is there, you know? So tell me how you went from stepping into the world of spiritual practices, a more contemplative type of faith, and deciding, hey, I want to write a book about this.
Well, they came together actually as soon as I realized how little was available for
Mm,
parents of small children, um, on the advice level or on the kind of resource level. I decided like I would document my journey. And so that took me on this journey. And the book that I ended up publishing isn't the one that I started, but I wrote a book over 10 years, which was aimed at mums of parents really of small children. Because when I was
mhm,
in that season, I think I thought, no season is harder than this, is how I felt
Right.
at the time.
Yeah.
I was like
Yeah.
the ultimate, sort of 4 children, 6 years. That was all I could see. But what happened was, as I got further and further through, other things started to happen. So like we relocated, and then that was a season.
Mm.
A period of ill health, that was a season. Some disappointments, and that's a season. And then I suppose eventually I realized, there's just always something. It changes, but there's always something where this can go, this relationship and priority of God in our lives can fall by the wayside to pressures and demands, whatever they are. And so the book essentially didn't get published. I put it forward, and a publisher had it for a long time, about 10 months, and they'd invested financially in it, and it looked like it was going to go all the way through, but in the end it didn't. And then I really lost heart, I think, and sort of, and then I had a couple of goes at trying to kind of rewrite it, but kind of use the same outline. And I felt very clearly God invite me to just let it go. Like, you need to lay this one to seed and really just leave it. And like 10 years of grabbing bits and pockets of time and that I had to do to get that together in that season was pretty hard to let that go. Really one of the hardest things I've had to do, but I really did know. It made me think of that. It's like putting new wine in old wineskin. I couldn't kind of use it. I had to just leave it. And then I had fallow time, maybe about 2 years. And then October 2023, I just kind of knew, okay, I need to write the same kind of thing, but for everyone. And I'd learned so much about over that time, way more than when I was writing originally. And by January 24, so 3 months, I had written the book that is now in your hands, Faith Habits and How to Form Them. I'd written the first draft, and it's honestly barely changed since then. Even obviously it's gone through drafts and sorted out my referencing and things, but
yes.
then 10 years and then letting it go was, I think, like all the foundation, sowing the seeds, and then it was just there. It just poured out of me in quite a dramatic fashion, actually, because I'm still obviously working, got 4 kids, busy. But I mean, I can remember this day that I wrote 14,000 words in one day, and I'm not fast at time. I kind of felt physically sick, but I almost couldn't stop. Just it was just, and so I felt God's real blessing in it. And then it's actually, what's the date? I'm just thinking of the date. It's 2 years yesterday that I put pen to paper.
Wow.
So,
wow.
It's pretty incredible at this time.
Yes, it is. Yeah. I love that. I was just talking with someone else recently about this on another upcoming podcast interview about just the beauty of God's timing. I mean, as a spiritual director, I think God's timing is one of the big things people wrestle with. I mean, who doesn't, right? But to see these dreams that we have or things that we desire almost come to fruition and then fall away. Like, the disappointment of those things is very real. And yet I've seen God time after time in my own life, in the lives of people I love, in my friends' lives, come back. It comes back around, sometimes in a different way, but still very similar. And it is so much better than our plan A.
So much better.
So much better. It's like, then you're like, thank you. Thank you that, it's that, you weren't on my timetable, God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I sort of die a little bit on the inside when I think about how close that was to being in the world, because I was still very hard on myself back then. And there was still definitely that kind of pressure and sort of striving. It came through, and I think God's kind of worked a lot of that out of me by the time I've got to this one. So I'm so glad, actually, that it's in my cupboard instead of on anyone's shelf, because want to have passed that on. Of course, this one will be imperfect, and I'll probably have similar thoughts a few years down the line from this. But yeah, this was the one that was meant to exist.
Yeah, I totally understand that. I mean, I feel like there's so much, and I say this that it's as an encouragement to anyone who's dealing with something like this, that those fallow times, as you called it, which I love that term for it, those fallow times, those liminal spaces between what was or we thought what was going to be and what is coming, there is so much goodness there. So much goodness that comes from that, that gets poured into what eventually comes to fruition in such a way that it wouldn't even be what it is if you hadn't had that time. I mean, once the girls came home, and we went through, over a decade of just intense, intense caregiving, with them on top of raising our teenage sons and just life, everything else we're all involved in, right? People would be like, oh, because I was a writer, oh, are you going to write about this? You're going to write about this? Are you going to write about this? And I would say, I don't know if I'll ever write about this, but I do know this much because I was in the moment. This is not that time.
Yeah.
I knew in my heart God was teaching me something that I would need to know through experience to ever speak to that story in a way that brought healing. And to anyone who read it, to myself to write it, because as you very well know, it takes so much of yourself when you write, that it wouldn't be something that would end up discouraging me, depleting me. And so I love like what you're saying, like that fallow time, it was needed for what we're now holding in our hands. And I feel like we don't give those seasons the credit that they deserve.
When you're in them, they're very hard because
Yes.
you're not able to see what's next at that. I mean, I certainly wasn't. And then when you're letting go of something that took 10 years, you're hardly motivated to do something again. So I just had
Exactly.
no idea and just felt really sad and disappointed and like, oh, what was that kind of all for then?
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't get it, as we often don't when we're in the dark, like, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things that I absolutely love about your book, and I know I'm looking at this more from like, a nerdy perspective, it's so organized. And I so dig that in a book. I love sections and themes and, you know, it's just because then it becomes so like a book like this book that you wrote is, yes, you can sit down, you can read this book, you can glean so much and go on and take it with you. But it's also a book that I think becomes a reference guide once you're done.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, what was that spiritual practice? Or I read something about it, or she said something about this, or oh, I'm feeling dry in the area of my spiritual practices. I want to try something new. I'm going to go back. I'm going to flip through it. Oh, that's right, liturgical prayer. I'm going to read that again. Like it's one of those kinds of books, and I dig those kinds of books so much.
Yeah.
So I love the way you organized it.
I did try and make it really accessible and so that it would be helpful if somebody had, if somebody like you said can just read it, great. But if they can't and they just can take one section at a time, and then they're still going to be able to do that.
Yeah. It's great for moms too, because, okay, I've got 10 minutes. I don't know what it's like in the UK, but car line is a big thing here in America where you take because we have to just about drive everywhere. We don't live in walking distances from things very often. And so you take your kid to school, you drop them off in the morning, but in the afternoon, people usually get there 10 or 15 minutes before the bell rings. So there's this big, long line of cars and moms sitting in there. So there's almost like this whole subculture of what to do, leave it to the moms to be like, what do I do with this 15 minutes? Instead of just like, I'm just going to sit and listen to the radio. It's like, do I listen to a podcast? Do I read a book? Some people bring embroidery. Some people, there's a whole thing. And so I love that this book is something, leave it in your car after you finish reading it. You're sitting in car line, open it and go back over something, I mean, it's like so perfect for that subculture of moms that are sitting in car lines. So if you wouldn't mind, just take a little bit of time and give us like a brief overview of what's in the book.
So I really wanted to take people on a whole journey where it wasn't just sort of more information, but like a journey through their own heart and lives, so that when it comes to the information, they can actually integrate it and it can become something that becomes part of their life. So I share a bit of my story to just kind of ground me as a very ordinary human being who's been on a journey of ups and downs, so that people can hopefully see something of themselves within that, some element. And then look at how do we form habits? I'm sure we've all got a couple of bad habits, so we can use the kind of science behind that to work out, okay, so how do we form good habits? So looking at some of what goes on in your brain, just understanding why it's hard to stick to something, because a lot of us, I mean, I certainly have circled around so many times trying something, do it for a bit, go all out, miss a few days, don't do it anymore, feel bad, just it's horrible. So just kind of explaining about that and what's going on. And then getting people to look at why they want to do this, what's motivating them, what's important for them, because I've got things that are important to me and they're not going to be the same as what's important to you. And I have other examples, 4 other amazing people, really different people that shared. I get people to look at their 5 whys, why they want to do this. And I give lots of examples. And then go into a bit of the history. Okay, where does this even come from? Right back to kind of monks and saints, just getting that sort of lineage, and then being like, okay, not a monk, not a saint, what does this look like for me? And then look at it in daily, weekly, monthly, seasonal, and yearly practices, because some things are important, but maybe you can only do them 4 times a year, but it's better not doing them at all. So it's just kind of looking, or what are these things that I really need to do every day because they're so important to me, and just helping people to look at it. And then there's questions and reflections and sort of how you pull it together. And essentially what it does is it helps people craft a rule of life, which basically is just a set of rhythms and practices that support your life and help you connect with God. So they're not like the goal of anything, but they're just there what help you. And I think that's basically it.
And I love learning about all of those different things. I love hearing people's stories. I love to have a little bit of brain science. I'm kind of a brain nerd. I just feel like it's definitely the new frontier of understanding humankind. And it helps us to understand ourselves and others so much when we look at, because so many times we're holding ourselves and other people accountable for things that we sometimes can't help. It's just the way our brains work. And having a child who's autistic, I've learned a whole other world of that, the brain only does what the brain can do, and sometimes we have to start to learn to work with it. Like you're saying, it's like you're having all this guilt about trying to form some habits, faith habits. And then, like you said, the typical human thing, we go all out, and then we miss a little bit of time, and then we fall back away from it, and then the guilt comes in, and then the shame comes in, right? And so when we understand what that cycle looks like, I feel like there's a lot more grace to be given for ourselves, which, especially you're talking about your experience and mine too, young moms need so much grace, because sadly, guilt just kind of comes interwoven into the DNA of motherhood. And so if there is one area we can kind of let ourselves off the hook, it should be our relationship with God, and so I love that. And then I always love learning about the history of anything. But I really love, I gained so much encouragement from the lives of the monks and the saints and the desert fathers and mothers, because they remind me how much we overcomplicate having a relationship with God.
Yeah.
I mean, just look at the books behind me right now on my bookshelf. They had none of these supports, none of these things, these podcasts and things to listen to and everything. And yet they're the lives we want to emulate, and there's so much beauty to learn from them. But I love too how you just get into just so many details of different things to do. I wanted to ask you what faith habits that you are currently using or forming in your relationship with God, or just the ones that have had the biggest impact in your spiritual formation.
I think the biggest one for impact has to be the prayer of Examen, right back from St. Ignatius, hundreds of years of history of people practicing that and just having, I do that daily. And it has actually become a habit, like brushing my teeth is a habit. It's so ingrained. I've done it for quite a few years. I used to journal it. And now I just I do that once a week, but the other days I just mull it over in my mind as I'm falling asleep. So just literally 2 or 3 minutes of just noticing, okay, where did I move towards God in my day? Where was that moment of goodness as I look back? And what was hard today? Where did I struggle? And just being able to process those things in the presence of God. And it's great daily, but when you do it and those days turn to weeks, turn into months, turn into years, notice patterns. And you start to see, oh, okay, I'm always struggling with this, or this is coming up a lot for me. And then you might take it to a spiritual director or dive a bit deeper, or think, oh, actually, taking that few minutes on my walk without headphones, without anything, and just looking around is really settling my nervous system. I'm going to try and do that a bit more. So you gather kind of information, as well as obviously spending time with God. It's very revealing when you do something that much. And I think it just kind of gets easier and easier, because with practice, of course, like anything with practice, it gets easier with time. And then I do that once a week in community in the prayer orchard, and we go through our week rather than our day. And that's really nice. And I wouldn't do that. I know I wouldn't if I wasn't doing it in community, but showing up with a few people. My daughter does it every Sunday evening, a little chat, little hello, and then looking at that together. It's just so, it's become really, really important to me. So that's definitely the one I think I've seen the most transformation from. And then spiritual practices outside of that, I mean, some of them, like for me, are very so like the Sabbath is that very steadying kind of punctuation in every week, that so it doesn't bleed one thing into the next. Like, 4 kids, 5 jobs. If I don't, I am just going to feel on some sort of merry-go-round that I don't know how to get off. And so having that in makes a big difference, and the daily Examen. But then really what is so important for me, and I've tried all different things, and I always come back to, I need a little bit of time in the morning.
Yeah.
And there were seasons I couldn't really do that, because the moment I needed every bit of sleep I could get. And then I remember, I don't know if it's in this book actually, but there was one season, I think I had maybe three boys then, and I was really, really exhausted. And I remember just saying a couple of words of prayer, like a breath prayer over and over as I walked from my bed to like a cot in the morning. And that was it. So probably like 20 seconds, that's what I had. But I just gave what I had, and that was what I had. But now anything pre 7 a.m. is mine. So it's just kind of easily, my youngest is 11 and a half, so nobody needs me before 7 a.m. So that's just kind of up to me. But I find that I just want to, and I want to get up early. I can go to bed earlier. So I'm acting as in a response to my life, and that's okay. So I do like to spend some time in a journal and just being with God and taking a few breaths, and just kind of seeing where that kind of goes. So those are all really important to me.
Yeah, I love that. I don't know if you've noticed this or if it's just something that I've noticed, but I feel like the more I lean into spiritual practices, the simpler my relationship becomes with Jesus. And also, I've noticed that in difficult seasons, whether that's busy or trial, whatever it is, that it's taken me a while to learn this, but that for me, less is more in that space of spiritual practices. Like when I first started my journey in faith habits and I was beginning to form them, I would go through a difficult season and be like, I got to hunker down. I need to do more contemplation. I need to do more scripture reading and journaling. I need to make sure I've examined every day. I'm putting it in an alarm on my phone. And then I don't really remember the shift, but I remember there being one where I felt an invitation to do less. And all of a sudden, that season felt lighter. Nothing changed. It was still what it was, whether it was overwhelmed, busy, or trial. But I found that what I decided to do was to come in the mornings, like you're saying, before the kids get up, which is priceless, and sit. Just sit with him with a mindset that I am sitting in the presence
Yeah.
of God.
Yeah.
Maybe some great, I love ambient music. Put that on and just sit and imagine myself in his presence. Sometimes a prayer might come up. Sometimes it would just be the Our Father. Sometimes I would just feel myself breathe. And it literally felt like I was being held. Do you tend to, in those seasons, feel like more helps you or less?
I think in hard seasons, it kind of comes down to what really matters. And for me, that is the love and presence of God. And so I think just constantly reminding myself that in any way I can. And so, yeah, I would say less. Anything that gives me a sense of space and calm. And
Mm-hmm.
another, which makes me think another one for me would be some silence and solitude.
Mm-hmm.
Not naturally that way, particularly like people and um, busy life and friends and all the rest of it, but more and more taking whatever form that I can of having just, yeah, less input and more just being, I find more and more restorative and gives me perspective. And when
Mm-hmm.
I get in the vastness of God, like big nature, maybe just a walk or
Mm.
sitting and going within, and prayer in that way, and kind of being with God and trying to keep my attention there as much as I can, which is obviously a practice, the more peace and perspective I have. And the kind of littler things seem, the more I'm kind of, I suppose, yeah, in that kind of eternal large space, the more I'm able to gather some perspective on what I'm going through. So yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
I think too, one of the reasons that it could be that way is I don't know that we are as aware as we need to be at the noise in our lives. That's one of the reasons I stepped away from so many, just most social media, even though, that affects me, being able to, the things that I do, people being able to find out about it, because every time I entered into those spaces, I felt a cacophony of just almost like sound and noise and thoughts. And I feel like the parallel to that is when we are in times that are difficult, many times our minds and our brains feel assaulted by what to do and how to fix it and what's going on and how's this going to turn out. And so what we need is the counterweight to that
Absolutely.
of silence, of solitude, of, like you said, going on a walk, without your phone, not without, what I mean without your phone is like without maybe music or without listening to a podcast or without calling a friend. Like just go and let there just be silence. Hear the wind through the leaves, just not even go with, I'm going to think this through on my walk. Just go or just sit, just be that whole be still and know that I am God. I always feel like that true translation of that for my heart is be still so that you can know that I am God. That it takes that. I want to go back to something you were talking about in Faith Habits, how you have like daily, weekly, monthly, yearly. And I absolutely love that because I feel like that's so much opportunity there for anybody who has a busy life, whether it's parenting or you're working and you have children or you just have a busy job, or you do lots of things. To when we come to that and we're like, oh, I can't do something daily. I just do not have the time to do daily. And then you're looking at weekly. I just cannot, I don't know that I can commit to something weekly, right? But to look at letting it be okay to maybe do something monthly. Maybe you set aside an hour or 2 hours, on a Saturday once a month. And that's where you just really connect with God in whatever way that is. Because my introduction to spiritual practices was not a deliberate introduction to spiritual practices as we're talking. It was actually much sooner. And it was my first therapist was actually a teaching pastor at a church here. And I remember very well the session where I don't know what I was talking about that prompted this for him, but he said, Amy, when do you have Sabbath? And I said, well, Sundays, like most people, we go to church and then we help with this and then we're doing this and then we come home and we do this. And then at the evening we go back to church and we do this and we do that. That's our Sabbath. It felt just that's our Sabbath. Nothing wrong with that. And he said, no, that's not what I asked you. I asked you, when is your Sabbath? And I remember just sitting there trying to understand what he was trying to say. And I finally looked at him and said, I don't know what you're asking me. And he said, when do you get away by yourself with God? Maybe you bring a Bible, a journal, and a pen, and you just sit and you're just alone with God. And the thought had never occurred to me to do that. Yeah, I might have Bible study time, but I'm in the house, the kids are around, or I go to Bible study. That like total aloneness with God without an agenda or a book to help me or something, workbook, was so foreign to me. But when I started to do it, it literally changed so much in my life. And what I did, this is going to sound a little hoity-toity, but I live in Orlando, so when in Rome, I would go on a Sunday afternoon after church to the Grand Floridian Resort, which was like 20 minutes from my house because I live on that side of town. And I would go to their tea room. Now it's not there anymore. Very, very sad. Never came back after COVID for some reason, but it was in the book of the Great Tea Rooms of North America. And it became my little refuge. I went by myself. I had my tea. I had my scones. And I would sit and wait on God to give me a scripture to read, which I was always nervous he wouldn't show up. He would stand me up and not give me a scripture to read, or even I would not be able to feel his presence. Every time, even though we did it every time I went, I had that fear, which was something else to work through with him, right? And I would journal. For me, every Bible study that I wrote after that came from those moments at the Grand Floridian, just listening to him pour into my heart. And so that was something that I was maybe struggling with daily, but I had weekly, right? And then as years have gone on, I have really come to love taking a a little bit of time in January. I know you get away to Shepherd's Hut a lot, which I mean, we don't have those here, but I wish we did. Or you get to, is it Lindisfarne?
Yeah, or I have a retreat.
Holy Island?
Yeah, Holy Island or up into a retreat place just up the country a little bit. Yeah, just another
Okay.
far away. But yeah,
So I know you,
I
yeah,
am.
you do that too, where you kind of go away by
Yeah.
yourself for overnight or a day or two. And which I know is not possible for everyone. And I'm grateful that it is for me at times. Not all the time either, but at times. But I plan it ahead of time. And I
Oh yeah.
go in the beginning of the year and I do a yearly examine
Mm.
over the whole year and think of the year ahead. Anyhow, even those things like that, like you say, I'm saying this to say, don't negate the power of a monthly or yearly or quarterly
Mm.
kind of faith habit to form. Those can also be very powerful.
Yeah. In fact, one of the things I do that really, really helps me, because life for me isn't static, and I don't think it is for many people, really. There is a fluidity to it. Is every season I will mark out
Yes.
hours to just review my practices and review how's it going. Um, do I need to take something away? Do I want to add something in? Does something just need to shift? Is something just not aligning well anymore? And then make those sort of little adjustments. And that really helps me feel like I know where I am, that like I'm choosing something in my life. It's not all just happening to me, but I'm actually.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a beautiful reframing of control in our lives. And then I think about like with the holidays coming up, I really like to encourage women to sit down and think, what do you want to get out of the holidays? Because for most women, the holidays is all about giving and making it wonderful for everyone else. And that's fine. And we do get joy from that, but we also get harried and hurried. And so, what do you want to receive during that time? Is there a devotional that you would like to lean into? Or would you just like to sit and, put yourself in the story of Luke 2, once a week and journal about the different characters in there and what it would be like or what you think they may have been thinking? You want to go listen to the carolers at such and such place. You want to go to a particular market, but be intentional about what you think you need to stay spiritually connected over that time. Don't allow yourself to get lost in it. So I love that seasonal. And you're so good about really tapping into the seasons and the way that they affect you. I mean, I don't have seasons, so I think you have to have seasons to really understand that. It's
Yeah.
always summer here pretty much. So, or some version of it. It's like, oh, this is the, Seattle summer is now here. But it's still summer.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
someone else's summer, when it's cooler, but it's still summer. But so I love that too. I love that too for people who live in those places. Okay, with the time that we have left, I want to talk about pilgrimage as a spiritual practice.
Mm-hmm.
And you have been to the Isle of Iona on your own with John, but on your own
Yeah.
before we all went as a group and took a group of women.
Yeah.
And we will be doing it again together in 2027, which so exciting because I get to see you again in 2027. So tell me about, what are your thoughts about pilgrimage as spiritual practice, as a faith habit?
Yeah. So this is one of the ones that I put down as yearly for me,
Mhm.
because it doesn't feel like something I could access any
Yeah.
more than that as an absolute most. And I think the main thing is it is this idea of taking an external journey of some kind that mirrors an internal journey of the heart. And I just love to talk about accessibility, I think, for this really, because maybe, yes, you can go to some far-flung birthplace of a saint or something on a 2-week walk. Maybe you can. Maybe that's once in your lifetime.
Mhm.
what about when you've got a day? Is there something that you can do there? And it can be as simple as looking up a really interesting church that's within your city and figuring out, I'll drive this far and I'll walk the last half an hour. And as I do, I'll
Hmm.
ponder these things along the way. So I think it's just this idea of taking a journey and seeing what God reveals in you, shows you in that time. And it is wonderful if you can get away on a slightly longer one, of course. I did um actually through you, Amy, telling me about it, I did end up last year going on my first like official one with a group
Yes.
when I went to the birthplace of Saint Ignatius and spent a week doing a pilgrimage there, which was really incredible to go kind of stand in the places, see the things, look at original things and all of that, hear the stories, and yeah, really incredible. And it's very interesting what comes up when we go on these journeys because we
Mm.
come out of our normal, and that's a teacher in itself when we're, maybe we're not in charge of our food, or we don't know what the weather's going to do, or we don't know what the other people might be like on it. All those things can kind of build into what ends up happening. And I mean, I had sort of dreams that I talk about in the book of what I thought it would be like. And it wasn't how I expected, but it was really, God met me in different ways I probably needed more. That I couldn't have
Mm.
imagined for myself.
Hmm.
So yeah, but I think it's
Yeah.
a really incredible spiritual practice, but it doesn't have to just be the big, it's not like trekking the Holy Land or nothing,
Hmm.
there are
Hmm.
like
Yes.
things you can do. Um,
Yes. Yes. I agree. I agree. And I also think, finding churches, or sometimes it's not even churches, just gardens and other places will have prayer labyrinths.
yeah.
You can actually, just go online, prayer labyrinths near me, and you will be surprised the places that have them. A lot of places have them sometimes during Lent. They can
Yeah.
bring in like temporary ones that are like a mat they lay out in the
Yeah.
church or something like that. Finding a place that has Stations of the Cross,
Mhm.
and just walking those Stations of the Cross, getting maybe a little booklet that tells you about it, and meditating on a particular idea at each station. But, you know, even wandering through gardens can be a pilgrimage, a start point, an end point, and something that I think I'm going to ponder along the way. I think is all invitation to making pilgrimage accessible. But I also think that one of the things pilgrimage can do for us, if we do actually go out of our area, our comfort zone to do it, is that it helps us address and notice and be aware of our attachments, which, as Saint Ignatius, in Ignatian spirituality, we talk a lot about attachments. And you might think you don't have any until you go even anywhere, but especially overseas, wherever that is.
Yeah. Mhm.
When the language might be different, um, like you said, you don't have control over what you're eating, maybe even when you're eating, accessibility of food in between those times, um, you know, transportation. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not. Sometimes the beds are great, sometimes they're not. You pay all this money and there's a Debbie Downer in your group. You hoped that they would do this or that on it, but the people don't. Like, there's so many things that you realize how. I feel like then the quest becomes, how do I stay connected with God when all of these other things fall away? And where can I learn, what am I learning about myself because of that? So, yeah.
Yeah, it's an amazing, amazing practice to bring in for sure.
Yeah, it is. Okay. So, one of the last things I would like to ask you, and I think we've kind of talked about this, but if you can think of anything that's maybe more off the grid than the typical faith habits, or maybe it's not a faith habit, it's just a habit. But I like to ask my guests, how do you keep your own soul evergreen through all the different seasons of life? what are some things you maybe do physically or mentally, emotionally, or you do for yourself to help keep your soul vibrant no matter what season you're in?
The first thing that comes to mind is actually, I talk a little bit about in the book about the fact that we have the kind of classic spiritual practices that we all know, like reading our Bible, going to church, but there's also kind of non-classical ones. And this is kind of where it blows wide open. And one of the things I put in there is like mini rituals, just these little things that you do that breathe life. So I really love essential oils, and I've got this blend that I absolutely love. And just maybe one drop in my hands, rub my hands together, breathe in, and it just settles me. So these little, and for me, it's a sacred pause. It's not just smelling something nice. It's linked to God for me, that it has that association. My husband has a really lovely, like little mini one where he'll light a candle and then light another candle off it, and remembering like Christ's light kind of lighting into him, and just all these little mini things we can do, stepping outside, smelling the fresh air first thing in the morning, these kind of little micro ones that comes to mind for me. And also anything, I feel like everything's connected. So for me, there's a knock-on effect. So, if everything in my house is a mess, my head's a bit of a mess. If I eat terribly, I don't feel good. So one of the things that I do that really helps keep me feeling well and feeling myself and feeling like I live by my values is I do a seasonal cleanse twice a year. And this is on my mind because I'm on day 4 of it right now in this conversation. So at the turn of spring, like winter into spring, at the turn of summer into fall, I do one. So that's where I am now. And that just kind of stripping everything right back, eating very simple, repetitive food, nourishing my body with self-massage and rest, taking some of the clutter out. Doing that twice a year gives me a bit of a reset, and I just really need it. I mean, I have a lot of attachments, so I need as much help as I can with all of that. So yeah, that's another thing that really helps me each year.
So, okay. Thank you for being with me today. Tell us, is the main place that we can get the book here in the States Amazon?
Yeah, and Barnes & Noble.
Oh, Barnes & Noble. Okay.
And I'm not sure outside of that with independent.
Okay. And I will put in the show notes the link for the Prayer Orchard with Emma. I'll also link the book in both of those spaces, and her website and all of those things. Thanks, Emma.
Thank you for having me. It was lovely to chat.
Thank you for joining me today. If you're longing to slow down and connect with God in a more embodied way, I'd love to invite you to explore my new devotional, Sacred Dust, a 25-day embodiment devotional. It's a gentle invitation to return to the embodied faith of ancient Christianity and the sacredness of your ordinary life. Sacred Dust releases November 1st at HoratioPrinting.com. That's HORACIO printing.com. If you'd like a sneak peek into the devotional, you can join us at HoratioPrinting.com on October 27th to get a look at the devotional and see what it entails. You can also join me here on the podcast on October 27th for a deep dive behind the devotional with Horatio Printing's founder, Polly Payne. Time with you is always a favorite of mine. Let's stay in touch. Follow the links in my show notes, visit my website, evergreensoulwellness.com, or join my Her Evergreen Soul Substack. Thanks for joining me. Until next time, keep your soul evergreen.